Daksha dayo ye bhavadadayascha. Svarlokapala kagalokapala. Nilokapala sthalalokapala. Aham bhavo yajna ime prajesha. Daksha dayo ye bhavadadayascha. Svarlokapala kagalokapala. Nilokapala sthalalokapala. Aham bhavo yajna ime prajesha. Dakshadayo ye bhavadadayascha. Svarlokapala kagalokapala. Nilokapala sthalalokapala. Aham bhavo yajna ime prajesha. Dakshadayo ye bhavadadayascha. Svarlokapala kalagalokapala. Nilokapala sthalalokapala. Aham bhavo yajna ime prajesha. Dakshadayo ye bhavadadayascha. Svarlokapala kagalokapala. Nilokapala sthalalokapala. Aham bhavo yajna ime prajesha. Yakshadayo ye bhavadadayascha. Svarlokapala kagalokapala. Nilokapala sthalalokapala. Aham bhavo yajna ime prajesha. Dakshadayo ye bhavadadayascha. Svarlokapala kagalokapala. Nilokapala sthalalokapala. Aham bhavo yajna ime prajesha. Dakshadayo ye bhavadadayascha. Svarlokapala kagalokapala. Nilokapala sthalalokapala. Matajis? No? Okay. I'm just going to read the word for word for that first verse as well, and then I'll read the English translation. Aham, myself, Brahmaji. Bhavaha, Lord Shiva. Yajnaha, Lord Vishnu. Ime, all these. Praja Ishaha, the father of the living beings. Daksha Adayaha, Daksha, Marichi, Manu, etc. Yea, those. Bhavat, yourself. Adayacha, and the bachelors. Sanat Kumar and his brothers. Svarlokapalaha, the leaders of the heavenly planets. Kagalokapalaha, the leaders of space travelers. Nilokapalaha, the leaders of mankind. Talalokapalaha, the leaders of the lower planets. Okay, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Ki Jai. I myself, Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu, great generators of living beings like Daksha and Prajapati, yourselves, Narada and the Kumars, heavenly kingdoms like Indra and Chandra, the leaders of the Burloka planets, the leaders of the earthly planets, the leaders of the lower planets, the leaders of the Gandharva planets, the leaders of the Vidyadhara planets, the leaders of the Charanaloka planets, the leaders of the Yakshas, Rakshas, Uragas, the great sages, the great demons, The great atheist and the great spaceman, as well as the dead bodies, evil spirits, Satan's, jinn, Kushmandas, great aquatics, great beasts and great birds, etc. In other words, anything and everything which is exceptionally possessed of power, opulence, mental and perceptual dexterity, strength, forgiveness, beauty, modesty, opulence, and breeding, whether in form or formless, may appear to be the specific truth in the form of the Lord, but actually they are not so. They are only a fragment of the transcendental potency of the Lord. Purport. Those in the list given above, beginning from the name Brahmaji, the first living creature within the universe, down to Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu, Narada, and other powerful demigods, men, supermen, sages, rishis, and other lower creatures of extraordinary strength and opulence, including the dead bodies, Satan's, evil spirits, jinn, aquatics, birds, and beasts, may appear to be the Supreme Lord, but factually none of them is the Supreme Lord. Every one of them possesses only a fragment of the great potencies of the Supreme Lord. The less intelligent man is surprised to see the wonderful actions of material phenomena, as the aborigines are fearful of a great thunderbolt, a great and gigantic banyan tree, or a great lofty mountain in the jungle. For such undeveloped human beings, merely the slight display of the Lord's potency is captivating. A still more advanced person is captivated by the powers of the demigods and goddesses. Therefore, those who are simply astonished by the powers of anything in the creation of the Lord, without any factual information of the Lord himself, are known as Shaktas, or worshippers of the great powers. The modern scientist is also captivated by the wonderful actions and reactions of natural phenomena, and is therefore also a Shakta. These lower grade persons gradually rise to become Sauryas, worshippers of the sun god, or Ganapatyas, worshippers of the mass of people, as Janata, Janardan, or Darida, Narayan, etc., in the form of Ganapati, and then rise to the platform of worshipping Lord Shiva in search for the ever-existing soul, and then to the stage of worshipping Lord Vishnu, the super soul, etc., without any information of Govinda, Lord Krishna, who is the original Lord Vishnu. In other ways, some are worshippers of race, nationality, birds, beasts, evil spirits, Satans, etc. The general worship of Shani Dev, the lord of distressful condition, and Sita La Devi, the goddess of smallpox, is also common to the mass of people. And there are many foolish men who worship the mass of people or the poor class of men. So different persons, societies, and communities, etc., worship some of the potent manifestations of the Lord, wrongly accepting the powerful object as God. But in this verse it is advised by Brahmaji that none of them is the Supreme Lord. They are only borrowed plumes from the original Almighty Lord Sri Krishna. When the Lord advises in Bhagavad Gita to worship him alone, it is to be understood that worshipping Lord Krishna includes worshipping all that is mentioned, because he, Lord Krishna, includes everyone. When the Lord is described as formless in the Vedic literatures, it is to be understood that all these forms mentioned above within the experience of universal knowledge are different exhibitions of the Lord's transcendental potencies only, and none of them factually represents the transcendental form of the Lord. But when the Lord actually descends to the earth or anywhere within the universe, the less intelligent class of men also mistake him to be one of them, and thus they imagine the transcendence to be formless or impersonal. Factually, the Lord is not formless, nor does he belong to any of the multi-forms experienced within the universal forms. One should try to know the truth about the Lord by following the instructions of Brahmaji. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utaf Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tubhyascha Kripa Sandubhi Evacha Patita Nam Pavanepyo Vaishnavepyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swami Namane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavari Pashtati Deshtarine. I myself, Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu, great generators of living beings like Daksha and Prajapati, yourselves, Narada and the Kumars, heavenly demigods like Indra and Chandra, the leaders of the Burloka planets, the leaders of the earthly planets, the leaders of the lower planets, the leaders of the Gandharva planets, the leaders of the Vidyadhara planets, the leaders of the Charnaloka planets, the leaders of the Yakshas, Rakshas, and Uragas, the great sages, the great demons, the great atheists, and the great spacemen, as well as the dead bodies, evil spirits, Satans, jinn, Kushmandas, great aquatics, great beasts, and great birds, etc. In other words, anything and everything which is exceptionally possessed of power, opulence, mental and perceptual dexterity, strength, forgiveness, beauty, modesty, opulence, and breeding, whether in form or formless, may appear to be the specific truth and the form of the Lord, but actually they are not so. They are only a fragment of the transcendental potency of the Lord. So, in this verse, Lord Brahma is speaking to Narada, and he's kind of explaining, he's been talking about Lord Vishnu in the previous verses, but now he's talking about what isn't God. So he's going through this long list, as you can see, and talking about things that may seem very powerful and very opulent. They have all these, exceptional qualities, but they're not God. They're not the supreme. So it kind of reminded me back before I found Krishna consciousness, I knew this thing called neti, which is not this, not this. It's this kind of like, I guess it's a Buddhist meditation or something like that, where you're negating what it's not about what God is, it's about what you are. So it's very self-centered, but right. So you're thinking, it's not this, not that. You're trying to find out what the self is, and you can't find it in, it's not your thoughts, it's not your body, it's not this and not that. So, but the difference here is, while that's happening, the negation's happening, there's also the flip side, which what God is being explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, I've been really kind of contemplating on this, and people try to find God in so many different ways through mental speculation. Right down the road here, we've been going on Harinam, and there's this sticker I saw the other day that made me laugh that says, "The black man is God." And basically is saying, I am God, because I doubt that a white man put that up there. So, in the absence of Shastra and having access to Shastra and inquiring submissively, people will come up with all kinds of ideas and speculations of what God is, and I'm God, nature is God. As Mahosa Prabhu was saying the other day, some people think that frogs are God, that have this psychedelic chemical coming out of their body, and they worship them like God. Or as Prabhupada says in the purport, a little higher is worshiping demigods and thinking that to be supreme. But as we know from, thanks to Srila Prabhupada, we know that Krishna, Govinda, is actually the supreme. And no entity that's living within this material universe is supreme. So, I want to go through just a couple of, I'm kind of going to explore a little bit more about what people think is God and why they're wrong, and then kind of conclude with the last part of this purport, which is saying that one should try to know the truth about the Lord by following the instruction of Brahmaji. So kind of getting into, inquiring submissively and following Shastra and studying, and starting from the standpoint of proper knowledge. Let's see. So, all people are mentally speculating to find God, and they're looking for him in so many ways, and then as it says in Bhagavad Gita, avajananti ma mudha manushim tanam ashitam param bhava majananto mama bhuttam heshwaram. When God actually does appear in front of them, the foolish people, they deride him and they consider him an ordinary person. So they actually do have access to the truth and to knowing who God is, but they still continue with their mental speculations most of the time because they want to be God themselves and they're envious, or because they're just foolish and they want to, see God in nature or whatever. This part in the purport where Prabhupada's saying that those who are simply astonished by the powers of anything in the creation of the Lord without any factual information of the Lord himself are known as Shaktas, or worshippers of the great powers. The modern scientist is also captivated by the wonderful actions and reactions of natural phenomena, and therefore is also a Shakta. So this part, without any factual information of the Lord, I found that interesting because I used to be, I used to really like going out in nature and like going in the mountains and stuff and feeling connected with nature and all this stuff. But I had no factual information of the Lord. And the other day I was on a walk doing my japa, and for some reason, this whole idea of a tree coming from a seed was in my mind. And I saw this really big tree. I don't know what kind of tree it was, and I just was kind of like stunned for a minute, realizing like this came from a tiny little seed, and this tree sprouts, and then it creates so many more seeds, and it creates this infinite. But if that was the end of it, if that was the end of my kind of appreciation, then it would be, in this mood, I would be considered a Shakta. But because I was appreciating Krishna's creation and Krishna's ability to, his potency to create something so miraculous, it was in the proper understanding. And so we can still appreciate these things, but it has to be from the proper perspective of seeing that it's coming from Krishna. So I found that really interesting because, so many scientists and just people that consider themselves spiritual, they think that they're spiritual by appreciating nature, by, worshiping a frog. But if they were actually from the proper perspective, they would be able to do that still. But because they're not understanding Krishna or thinking about Krishna, they're in ignorance. So, let's see. Oh yeah, and then another point that Prabhupada makes is this progression that you make. So you go from this ignorant standpoint of worshiping nature and, tribal people are worshiping mountains and trees, etc. And then you kind of eventually become a worshiper of the sun god, and then demigods, and then eventually Lord Vishnu, and then you get all the way to this point and you still don't know about Krishna, about Govinda, the original Vishnu. But, I was kind of contemplating how Prabhupada has saved us from having to go through this whole long process that takes lifetimes and lifetimes and still doesn't even conclude in the ultimate knowledge. He's taken us straight to Krishna and given us, the Maha Mantra that we chant every day, and we can directly connect with the, Supreme Lord, the original creator of everything, and the original. There's Ishvara Parama Krishnaha Sachinananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakarna Karnam. He's the original. He has no other. Nothing has created him, and he's the original, omnipotent. So yeah, this mental speculation, it can't get us anywhere, and it actually leads to just infinite paths of being wrong. Because, what tends to happen is people get into spirituality and they maybe start reading some books and they try Buddhism, they try this and that, and they kind of figure out what they like and what they don't like and what kind of gratifies their senses or what fits in what their worldview was before, and they just get on that and they just decide that's the truth, and they kind of close their eyes and ears to anything else. I definitely have been in that state, and I also had an interesting story because my cousin came and visited a week ago or a couple months ago, and I didn't really know that she was kind of into this kind of thing. She's not really, but she was saying that, I believe in reincarnation and all this, and I was like, that's interesting. Really, I didn't know that. I wouldn't have expected that because she was more like Christian, brought up like that, and she was like, yeah, but like I believe that it's like you keep, what you like stay as the same body, and you have all your memories, and like you just like kind of keep going. I was like, you're just like coming up with this own mental speculation of what you think this concept of reincarnation is. You just pick that idea of reincarnation out of Vedic knowledge, and then just kind of twist it to whatever you want it to be, and then you gratify your senses with it. So it's just in complete ignorance. So many people are on this platform, unfortunately, and the only kind of solution that we have is to give them Prabhupada's books and teach them, let Prabhupada teach them, let Prabhupada preach to them. So it also says in here that some are worshippers of race, nationality, etc. We see that so much. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement, this whole, the black man is God. Nationality, obviously Americans are very patriotic, and we're, very prideful, but we also see that pretty much every country is like that. So they become worshippers of their own nationality or their race or whatever, and get so involved in politics and this and that, trying to fix the world when you can't fix this material world. It's the nature of it is to be chaotic, and especially in Kali Yuga, we're just devolving and into chaos and more degradation. So people that are on this platform of worshiping race and nationality, they're just bound for misery, because they're never going to be satisfied. Let's see. So another thing I was kind of taking from this is that people are mental speculating to find God because this inclination is within all of us as jivas. We have the inclination to worship and identify something as God. But because we're so puffed up and foolish, we just want to mentally speculate and think that we used our own power to find God. We don't want to, read a book that tells us this is how it is, and you have to submit and surrender to Krishna. You have to inquire submissively. We don't want to do that, because then it means that that enjoying life is the end all be all, and you can have your spirituality, I have mine, and it's a little different, and I believe this is God and you believe that is God, and it's all good because it's all God, and I'm God, you're God. It just devolves into this whole like nonsense. So let's see. Yeah, I covered that. One sec. But so, people do this, but even anybody that has like any kind of sobriety and sanity can easily see that what the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita are saying makes complete sense. And if you actually read through it and try to understand it, and talk to devotees and inquire from them, you can start to see that this knowledge is actually perfect because it's coming from Krishna. And we see so many people that come in and they see that this is the truth, and they're really into it. Yeah, man, this is awesome. I love the devotees. I love prasadam. I love chanting, and these books are great. This is definitely the truth. So by being non-envious in this way, you get a lot of mercy. But so many people are in this kind of state, and then they're not able to follow exactly correctly, and then maybe they still have material attachments. They have a job, they have a wife, a girlfriend. They like doing drugs too much or eating meat or something like that. But overall, they still appreciate and they see it as true. So these people are a little different than these mental speculators that think they are God, because they're actually, recognizing the truth as what it is. They just aren't able to, completely follow. So they'll get mercy, and maybe they'll later in life or in another life they'll get to take it up more seriously, and Krishna will be merciful upon them because they're not envious. Let's see. The other thing I was thinking is that, people are looking for God in all these different places, and especially in this country, I've noticed that people will kind of worship other people as God, or maybe not explicitly saying they're God, but it's almost like they're worshiping them in that way. So you see, there's actually so many people that their whole job and their whole career is just to glorify other people. So, there's, news anchors and tabloids and documentarians, people that make documentaries, they spend their whole life meditating on other people that they're going to make a movie about and glorify them. I remember before I came here, I watched the Michael Jordan documentary, and it was very inspiring, but somebody spent, it was about 10 hours long, and they must have spent maybe their whole life, their whole career, 20 years or something, putting this together, just meditating on Michael Jordan, this this beefeater, this guy that he was really good at dribbling a ball and shooting it into a basket. So they gave their whole life to this guy, and we have this tendency. I was reading in Krishna book the other day. We all have this natural tendency. We want to tell stories about other people and glorify them, and it's actually because we ultimately want to do that for Krishna. We want to talk about Krishna, glorify Krishna, think about Krishna, read about him, tell stories. Just always be reveling in the pastimes of Krishna. And so it's a perverted reflection in this material world that we take what's happening with these celebrities and people that have some of these opulences that are being listed in the translation here. We take them and we put them on a pedestal, and we get some kind of pleasure out of that, out of being inspired by them, or thinking that, okay, well, if they did that, maybe I could do that, because we're all people, and Michael Jordan, he's like the greatest, so maybe I could be in the NBA someday if I work hard, because that's what he did. He worked hard, right? So there's so many people like this that have their whole job is just to glorify other people. I was thinking about, even like this Joe Rogan, we've been talking about him. His whole job is to have a podcast where he brings on people and he just lets them talk about themselves. So he's just constantly having a new person to say, wow, what you're doing is so great. I love what you're doing, whatever it is. He has scientists and entertainers on there, and athletes and people that are high performing in top class of whatever field they're in. And they come and they talk about themselves, and he asks them questions about it. So he's always kind of meditating on the person he's going to talk to, and how am I going to worship this person? And his other job is a commentator for the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. So he does the same thing there. He glorifies people that beat other people up for a living, and he says, well, I think this guy's going to definitely win tonight. He's better at punching that guy and that guy's better at kicking, so he's definitely going to win. So his whole life is revolving around just worshiping the people that have exceptional power and perceptual, mental and perceptual dexterity, perceptual beauty, opulence, etc. There's sports broadcasters. There's a whole other profession where you're just glorifying, you're just watching other people do something and glorifying what they're doing. Authors, there's people that write biographies, but there's also people that write fiction. And so they spend their whole life just coming up with fake people and glorifying them and telling their story that's completely made up in their head. And so they're meditating on, Harry Potter or whatever, and they come up with all these stories of what they're doing, and this tendency is just there. You can see it. I have even more talent agents. There's people that their whole job is to book, and act for, book musicians to play gigs or whatever. So their job is to go around and glorify this musician to all the venues and say, you should really book this musician because he's really talented and his new album's so good and it's got this reviews, and so their whole job is worshiping the lotus feet of some rapper or whatever. And music producers, their whole job is to bring a musician into the studio and help them create what they want to create and glorify them, so that they can glorify themselves on the record. So there's this whole industry, there's industries out there that exist that are just about glorifying other people. And it's probably much more that I'm not even thinking of. But all of that is just glorifying this temporary mirage. These bodies are temporary, and the fact that 99% of the people, of the famous people, they're only even famous for a few moments, because their career will fade away. Michael Jordan, where is he now? Maybe he's still famous, but not like he was. Athletes and musicians, they all kind of fade away because their youth fades. Athletes, when your youth fades, you're out of a job. And musicians, when your youth fades, you're out of a job because a lot of it's built on your bodily beauty. So when you lose that, it's over. And even you see like really great musicians like the Beatles, like Paul McCartney's not making any new music. Even if he is, people don't care about him from the Beatles. They made all their best stuff back when they were young. So you hit the prime of your career and then you fade away into nothingness. And even the most famous will eventually fade away because, kalos mi loka ksayakrit pravirto. In time I am destroyer of worlds, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. He's going to completely destroy the memory of, even the most famous people. So all these people that are spending their careers and time and energy glorifying these people, they're completely wasting their human form of life. Instead, they could be, learning to glorify Krishna and his devotees, which is on the transcendental, and it's on an eternal spiritual platform. It's not actually affected by time. So, when you make any amount of devotional service, there's no loss or diminution. So by glorifying and worshiping Krishna and his devotees, you actually get eternal benefit, and you actually get real happiness, real fulfillment that you'll never get from worshiping some temporary body that's really good at sports or whatever. Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita, Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashati. Declare it boldly, Arjuna, that my devotee shall never perish. So because they shall never perish, that fame is not on a temporary material platform. And so worshiping them and, worshiping Krishna is something that lasts forever, and it continues on. Let's see, this other one point. Another point with this, these opulences that are listed in the translation. So people are worshiping, anything and everything which is exceptionally possessed of power, opulence, mental and perceptual dexterity, strength, forgiveness, beauty, modesty, opulence, and breeding. Just a little side note, the breeding, I found that interesting. And I was thinking about that for some reason. It made me think of this guy, you probably know Genghis Khan. He was this really famous, and I did a little bit of research on him. I mean, it seems like the Mongols, where he was from, Mongolia, the Mongols worship him. But what I was taught in school is that he was kind of like a really bad guy and rapist and killing all these people, but they worship him as some great saint. But there's actually this fact that's floated around. I don't know if it's actually true, but they say that 0.5% of all humans alive are related to him because he had so many offspring. So this opulence of breeding is very interesting, because this was, the topmost human that's like propagated his DNA, and people do worship him for it. It's interesting. I didn't realize that. And then there's this, people that worship, people that are renounced too. That's another thing that me and Chandan were talking about the other day. There's this guy, Chris McCandles, I think is his name, and there's this whole trend of homesteading where people will go out and like buy some like abandoned land in the middle of nowhere, and they'll just like, it'll just be them and their family, maybe a couple kids, and they just try to like turn it into a livable place. And they cut down the trees and like build like a little house and that kind of thing, and completely off the grid, that kind of things. But I was wondering, like, where did that trend come from? And it might not be the actual origin of it, but there's this guy, Christopher McCandles, that he actually grew up here in Atlanta, and he went to Emory. He was like top of his class. He was going to be like a doctor, and he was like really smart, intelligent, materially guy. And right after he graduated, he, for some reason, decided, the material world is just suffering, and he kind of saw that there's no happiness to be found in this world. So his solution was to drive out to, he drove first to California, I think, and he like burned his social security card and like, destroyed all his evidence that he was like a citizen, whatever. And like, he just like completely like destroyed his identity. And then he decided, I'm going to Alaska. That's where I got to be. And that's where I'll be happy. So he drove up, or he hitchhiked to Alaska. And he ended up in some like abandoned school bus up there. And he was just living off the land, like eating berries and whatever, hunting. And it was winter, so cold in Alaska. It's like crazy. I don't know how he did it, but eventually, I don't know if it was months later, he was like completely off the grid. His parents were looking for him because they were like affluent people, and they were like, where's our son? Where'd he go? He just kind of dipped out. And so they eventually found him. I don't know who found him. I guess people, the authorities or whatever, they found him in this bus. He was dead. He had eaten some poisonous berries when he was out there foraging. He got the wrong berries. So all of this happened, right? And you'd think, okay, like it's just some crazy guy, like he just like died, like no big deal. But then they made a whole book about him. They made a whole movie about the book. Yeah, it's like they're glorifying like anything, like he's some hero. He's like this big, dadu for like this whole like renunciation, like of material world, lifestyle. Now there's like the van life and the homesteading, and people that think like, like we can live simply, we don't have to live in these big houses and like have a 9 to 5, all that. Like, yeah, that's the real solution. Like that's renunciation. We got to renounce this world. So that's the way we do it. So, they worship him as some great renunciate, but it says, let me see, in the Bhagavad Gita, let me find this real quick, sorry. Basically that someone who renounces in that way is renouncing in the mode of ignorance. Let's see, Muhattasya parityagas tamasa parikirtitaha. If one gives up his prescribed duties because of illusion, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. But on the other hand, we see someone like Srila Prabhupada who, he renounced as well, but he did it in the proper way. He took sannyas and he came to America with nothing at all. He almost, left his body on the way over here. He had multiple heart attacks on the boat. He had not a penny in his pocket, and he came here. He didn't know anybody. People couldn't really understand him because of his accent, and it was a complete struggle. He was completely renounced. And then later on, as the Krishna consciousness movement was gaining some traction, he started, having some things that a materialist would see as not renounced. He would stay in a nice hotel or have a nice car and opening all these opulent temples and stuff. But people that actually understand realize that he had complete true renunciation, and not this whole moving to the wilderness by yourself and dying from poison berries. That's not true renunciation. That's in the mode of ignorance. but still the karmis will choose to idolize, that kind of thing. And they can't understand or recognize Srila Prabhupada's renunciation or appreciate it. So I really hope that, by distributing books, we can kind of get more people to understand what Srila Prabhupada did and glorify him, because it would be for their benefit and everybody's benefit. And then I kind of want to, conclude with this, the end of the purport. One should inquire submissively, one should try to know the truth about the Lord by following the instruction of Brahmaji. So inquire submissively and study Shastra and follow the process of devotional service. And following the instruction of Brahmaji is the same as following the instruction of Srila Prabhupada, because he's, we come in that line of disciplic succession. So, and obviously Srila Prabhupada's most, he said that the service most dear to him, I'm paraphrasing, I don't know exactly what he said, but is book distribution. So, by distributing lots of books and making that our life's mission and purpose, we will, be nicely serving Srila Prabhupada and will please him. And thus will please, the whole disciplic succession, all the way back to Brahmaji and back to Krishna himself. And these books are so important because they finally answer that question that people are looking for. People are mentally speculating to find God, and there must be some out there that are in that state that are genuine and they actually do want to find God, and they know if they find the truth, they're gonna surrender to Krishna. So it's kind of this process of dropping these bombs on them that eventually they'll go off and some of them will detonate and make them devotees. We saw this video that was posted recently. It was really inspiring for me. Is Maria Mataji, she got some books from Ramdas Abhiram Prabhu in Walmart, and she was, if I saw her in Walmart, I would never have thought, she'll take books and become a devotee and read Bhagavatam, like no problem. But look at what has happened, and she's this really nice, white lady, and she's from Gwinnett. That's where I'm from. So it's this whole generally when we go out on books and we see that kind of person, we don't think so much oh yeah, gotta give them books. And I mean, we want to give them books, but it's almost always a not so great encounter, I'll say. But she was really, inquisitive, and she was looking for that kind of thing. And she was talking about in the video how she used to go to church and she would ask these questions, and she would always want to know, deeper things that the priest wouldn't be able to answer. And she was always like, why can't they answer it? What's going on here? And that was my experience too. So I really connected with that. I grew up Christian, and I couldn't read the Bible. I did not understand it. It was so confusing to me. It's so cryptic, and just the English that's used is so kind of old, and I just didn't understand it. So even when I would ask questions to my church, they wouldn't be able to answer. And at that point, that was probably when I was 16, 17, I kind of just rejected religion in general, and kind of went on that path of mental speculation and try to find God for myself. And they don't have the answer, all because I had a bad experience at the church. So what we're doing is really important because we're giving people the proper understanding. And when they read these books, there's so many examples, obviously all over the place. Bhagavatam 1:1:1, saying, "O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance and destruction of the manifested universes." So right there, he is the cause of all causes. Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Paramakrishnaha, Sachinananda Vigraha, Anadir Adir Govinda Sarvakarna Karanam. He's the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he's the prime cause of all causes. Bhagavad Gita 9:10. The material nature is working under my direction. It's producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, the manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. Bhagavad Gita 7:6. All created beings have their source in these two natures. Of all that is material and all that is spiritual in this world, know for certain that I am both the origin and the dissolution. So these books, when people read them and they actually take to heart what's being said, they'll clearly see Krishna is supreme. Krishna is, the cause of all causes. He's the origin and dissolution. He's, controlling the material nature, which is controlling us. So, when you actually submit and inquire submissively and understand these books and see what Prabhupada is saying, you and what Krishna is saying, you'll see very clearly the answer to your question of who's God is very clearly answered. And then, from that point, you take up the process and you begin chanting, and you've been associated with the devotees, and you see it practically proven in your life. It's undeniably proven that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and he's right there. And even the last thing I'll say, it's so simple, it's said so many times, but like I was thinking about it, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, I remember when I first got the Bhagavad Gita 7 years ago, and I opened it up, that was one thing that really stuck in my mind, that phrase, Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I was like, what is that? I had no idea. I couldn't like begin to understand what that meant. But it's saying it right there so many times in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And, as people read these books and absorb them, they'll really start to, progress in Krishna consciousness and find true happiness and leave all this mental speculation nonsense behind. So I'll end my class there if there's any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna. Just made that point here. There's this. Who has the thing here? Yeah, you can pull up 1 to 27. There's this verse in the Bhagavatam. It says, Rajasamas prakritaya samashila bhajanti vai. Hitva pitri bhuta prajesadins Shri Aishwarya prajepsavaha. And this is a very amazing verse to look at here. Where it says, those who are in the modes of passion and ignorance worship in the same category, namely the forefathers, other living beings, and demigods who are in charge of cosmic activities. For they are urged by a desire to be materially benefited with women, wealth, power, and progeny. So it's a really important thing to understand that all those who are Shaktas, this is what they're into. Ultimately, Prabhupada is calling them Shaktas, because they are worshippers of material nature. Shaktas means worshippers of Durga. And actually, if we understand the philosophy deeply also, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he says that we are Shuddha Shaktas. We are pure Shaktas. We are also Shaktas. Why? Because we are ultimately worshippers of Srimati Radharani. We are following, in her footsteps, like all the way down Rupa Goswami, and then all the way down to the Guru Parampara, like that. We are following. So we are also Shaktas, but we are Shuddha Shaktas, in the pure form, in the purest sense of the term, Because when we understand that, we also see that, we understand Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he's controlled by Radharani's love for him. So we are considered to be the Supreme, not so to say, we're considered to be Shuddha Shaktas, Another point to also note here is when a person, when they start worshipping themselves too much, or when they start to think about themselves too much, or when they become self-obsessed, what happens is they actually go crazy. We wanted to, see what a VR experience is because we wanted to get one for the temple. So we went and saw this VR experience of the Van Gogh VR experience, That guy had like so many paintings of himself. So many, every year or every season he would make a painting of himself. And the more we think about, wow, I'm so awesome, I'm so great, the more mad we become, actually. The more crazy we become. So that's really important to note. And I had a question in this regard. So since you gave class, so what is Jinn and what is Kushmandas? Did you have a chance to research that?
I just briefly looked that up earlier. Well, the Jinn, at least. I didn't get too much time to look into it, but from what I could tell, Jinn is some kind of it's like translated as like genie or something. It's like a spirit. It's like a being that's not perceptible to our senses.
It's like a ghost?
Very powerful. Yeah, it's like a ghost kind of thing. Huh?
No, that's shaitan is jinn.
Yes. I don't know.
Ask Abhi, he's half Chinese. You can tell.
And the Kushmandas, I didn't have a chance to look at that. It says a special type of evil spirit in the translation.
Okay, and also in this regard to yourself, you were saying that how you're following the 90-90 process of Buddhism or whatever. It's also mentioned in the Bhagavatam also is 90-90 process. Not this, not this, not this, not this. So like at what point in your life did you decide to just like, I just got to surrender, this is freaking stupid, like when did you come to that realization? Because if you were like mental speculating your whole life more or less, and then something should have happened where you just gave up hope on your abilities to speculate.
Yeah. Well, when you're in that kind of ignorance, it feels like you might be like making progress or something like that, because you get maybe some material benefits of your mind is a little bit less agitated and less, anxiety and depression, that kind of thing. So in that way, when I was doing that, I mean, I was like learning about these different kinds of meditation. The main thing I would do is I would just sit silently and like meditate. So like I would just like close my eyes and just like fall asleep kind of thing. But like I noticed that after that, I would feel more like, if I was like really agitated before, if I did that for like an hour or 30 minutes, like I would feel like, okay, less agitated. Okay, that's good. Like I can like focus on what I need to do. And like, so it was more like a material benefit. The whole time like I said, when I was like 16 or 17, I kind of like rejected religion and thought, oh, like God isn't real and like all this thing. Because I felt like I'd been kind of like, not betrayed or just like misled by the church. And I was like, okay, so like these people are like bogus, like, they don't have the real answers to life. So therefore like, oh, and like, school is saying that science and like evolution is the real way. And like, okay, that makes sense to me. Like, cool. Like, I'll just go with that and just like, do what I want. So then it was this kind of long process of like, well, do I believe in God? Like, and just kind of like life experiences happening. And, particularly like going through like different losses, I noticed like made me feel more like, oh, I should surrender to God. Like I should like there's no like, I would have this situation that felt like, okay, like I'm happy, like this is good, like I get everything's nicely arranged, and then like boom, like my dog died or something, and I was like, oh, like it was like, oh, okay, like it wasn't as perfect as I thought. And like I had been reading some like philosophy, like maybe not, I mean, I read a little bit of Bhagavad Gita, but it's that kind of realm of like, I don't know if it was Vedic, but it just like books, there were people that were inquiring into this kind of thing, and they're saying material world is suffering, and like you have to be renounced, and you can't, like, you have to surrender to God. These kind of words were being said, but like I had no idea of who Krishna was, or like what the process of devotional service was. I would chant Hare Krishna some, and I think that really helped me, like to the point where when I came and met you guys, like that I'd had that before. And I noticed that actually, so I did that silent meditation, and then after I found chanting, I started doing that more, and I kind of like got a little bit more like attracted to that. And I listen to kirtans and like chant, japa sometimes, and like I was like, okay, this is actually like, I feel like some benefit from this. So then when I realized I had to surrender, it was just, I guess my life fell apart more, and I realized, okay, like there's definitely no happiness. Like I thought I had some semblance of like being able to put it together and like arrange it in a certain way to make me like happy, and then like it just kind of like Krishna just like kind of destroyed all that. So then I was like, okay, well I need something like, and before I met y'all, I was planning to like go to India, and I was just like looking for like, I was like, I need to do something. Like I can't just like be like everybody else and work some job and just like find a like girlfriend and get married and like that kind of thing, and just go down that path that everybody else is on. I saw that there was no happiness there,
So suffering, basically.
Suffering, yeah.
So, in regards to some like worshipping man, all that that's been mentioned in the purport, this is also a reference. Mainly, it seems that it's a reference to the, is it who? Well, it's a Mayavadi thing that Manava Seva is Madhava Seva. So that means that if you just serve the population, then you're serving God because they're all
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
So that's the main idea that's also being like coming through here, especially looking at it in a Vedic perspective and looking at that cultural aspects of it that's there with these people glorifying each other but more than that, I don't know if like, you may like someone and like let's say you like a superstar, but you wouldn't ever think of them as God.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in India, you look at people as God, and you say, okay, I serve them and I help them and I give them money, and that is your service. That is God that you did service to.
Yeah.
So there's a huge, although there's like there's innocence in the West, whereas when you have that philosophy that's deeply rooted like that, then it's like envy of Krishna. That's what we in the West. That's why it's like there are people that can take up Krishna consciousness some easier, some extent, because they don't have all these misconceptions. They admire someone, they worship them in that sense of admiration, but not so much like as God. It seems.
Hmm.
At least that's what I understand. Okay, we talk about this guy is good, but he's not like my life, my soul. And there may be a few crazy people like that,
Yeah.
but most people aren't like that. Whereas when you have that philosophy, you just see just Mayavad is just like straight up Mayavad.
Yeah.
So that's about Jesus. Though
Yeah.
that's their misunderstanding. I don't know what they don't have any understanding of that. This, yes. That's different. Yeah, I think there's still.
The basketball players used to call him Black Jesus.
Yeah.
So, but it's like even with the Jesus thing, they still distinguish between God and themselves. And
Yeah.
still, I don't think okay. They'll say Jesus is God. They'll appoint one person to God. Again, it's just like it's weird because their philosophy is just like completely just all over the place.
But-
Whereas when you have a philosophy of Mayavad, it's like, okay, you're God, I'm God, you and me, we're non-different. Everyone is God in here. So it's like it's close, but very far at the same time.
Before I came here, I was like following this bogus guru, and like I was gonna go to India. I was trying to go to India, and like the idea was to go there and like build this hospital actually.
Oh my God, that's the worst.
So like, and I'm sure that is what it was like that people think that, but in my mind, I was like, oh well. So before I came here, I was in Colorado. I used to go like my devotional service was like going to this like food like this homeless shelter and like making a meal for them and like serving them, and I was like, I was never like, oh, they're God, so like I should serve them, but I was like, oh, like God made them, and like he loves them, so if I like give them some love, then like God will be happy, that that kind of. But yeah, and then I came here and I saw that that's total nonsense, and yeah, exactly, yeah. And so now we distribute prasadam, and it's much better. So I like doing that.
So like in this verse, there's like a big long list of everything that's not God, but right at the top of the list you have Lord Vishnu. Can you explain this?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Well, so it says, I think it says in the purport that they have no knowledge of the original Lord Vishnu, Govinda, Krishna. So in this universe there is Lord Vishnu, but it's a plenary expansion of Krishna, and it's not the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. So within this universe there's Vishnu, and then within all the material universes there's also a Vishnu, or I guess multiple expansions of Vishnu. So ultimately the source of all of them is Krishna, Govinda.
Main point it seems is that it's still Lord Vishnu. It's not that it's like just because it's just the misconception comes that they see Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu as the same. There's they see Lord Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva as the same. That's
I
the
see.
main point.
I see.
Because because Vishnu is still God. It's because
Right,
Vishnu is Vishnu, but it's just that's their misconception is that Vishnu is the same as the rest of them. So that's one of them.
That makes sense.
Another question that I was wondering is like is like this neti philosophy like inherently like Mayavad or like Buddhist, because also like also like Lord Kapila like teaches like and like teaches Arjuna about the soul by saying it's like it doesn't wither, it can't be touched by water, it's like not this, not that type of thing.
I don't know if it's inherently that way. I mean, I think it can be a tool. Like we talk about, we're not the body, right? So and then, well, what are we? Like we're not the body, we're not the mind, we're not the thoughts, we're not this. So like you're kind of negating, in our when we're teaching, we're preaching to people. But it has to have that. It can't just go to zero. Like it can't go from like, you're not this, you're not that. It can't just go like not that, not that, not that forever. It has to say, well, what are you? You're the spirit soul. You're a part and parcel of Krishna. This is what you actually are, and you're in relationship to Krishna. You're a servant of Krishna. And so that's what I was lacking when I was doing it. I didn't have like the positive side. I just had like what I'm not, and I didn't have like what I am.
Did you say you're doing like a specific meditation with this? Like you would sit and think about like what I'm
not like all the time, but like it was one thing I came across like in just like reading books. It was like,
one thing that I
was
was like part of like a meditation club in college, and like people would come and like present like what they wanted to do, and we would all do it together. And like one of the most bogus things that we did was called thought labeling meditation, where like you sit there and you wait for a thought to come in your head, and then if you're thinking about like dogs or something, then you label that thought dog, and then you imagine crumpling it up and throwing it away. So I was thinking maybe you were doing like a similar like thing.
From what I could tell, like, I would always read about like the samadhi, and like you gotta achieve samadhi, and then like that's like the ultimate goal. So like you have to just like sit there and like the thoughts will come and they'll come, and then you just have to like not identify with them, and then like eventually like they're less and less, and then eventually it just like you can get into a state where it's just like no thoughts coming for like 10-20 minutes, and you just feel like wow, like I did it, like, and then it's like, and then you stop and you're like dang it, they came back. No, I felt like pretty like just like awake. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, spaced out, yeah.
I was just gonna say that it seems that all of these things that are listed in the purport, the root cause of them is just ignorance of the complete. But like this like just clicked with me the other day in one of Kalki Prabhu's classes, and I didn't think about it this way, but like the book distribution, it's this like mass education for the whole society. And that's like actually how we can solve all of these problems of people worshiping and seeing different things as God that aren't God.
Mm-hmm.
That if we just give them Prabhupada's books, we can just completely dispel all of these issues and these problems.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, I mean, it isn't like a question or anything. That just like clicked in my head the other day. I mean, I'm sure all you guys already know it, but I was just.
And like he was saying, like in the purport, typically there's this progression. They go from like this ignorant standpoint of like worshiping nature to like worshiping like sun god, demigods, and then like Lord Vishnu, and then they never get to like worshiping Krishna. And like Prabhupada's books just like kind of jump us over that whole thing. And, it's pretty amazing. Dude.
This is just a technical question. In the word for word, Mahotsav Prabhu, you might know this. The Sanat Kumars are referred to as bachelors. Yeah. Why is that? Bachelor is like a playboy, isn't it?
No. It just means like single man, basically, not married.
Ah.
You know what the, I guess, common conception of bachelor is like a playboy who's irresponsible. Prabhupada actually called them bachelor daddies. You know, so that's what Prabhupada called them. But bachelor in this, yeah, not the four Kumaras. Yeah, like basically the current definition of bachelor, Prabhupada actually called them bachelor daddies. He said, you know, it's okay if you want to be a brahmachari, but like or a bachelor, but don't be a bachelor daddy. He said that in Australia. Australia.
Is it? It's basically because like
Yeah,
if
he
you're
gets-
if you're
he gets to like like experiment with all of them and see who likes the best, and if he likes them at the end, he gives them like a rose, and then they like married for like a couple months.
Hmm.
Yeah, my original question was actually answered by Mahotsa, which I thought was really funny. It was like, why do like people just desire to like worship these things so much? Like you
Hmm.
get a higher pleasure when you serve Krishna. So like, why is it that you want to serve that? But and then he answered it. So it led to my next question was that people in the mode of goodness, is it they always worship Krishna, or is there something else that they worship too? Or is it just Krishna when you're in the mode of goodness?
No, well, you can worship Vishnu, right? I mean, it's worshiping Krishna, but you can worship like no, like you can be like
beat around the bush.
you can be like
a okay. No, yeah, it's not just Vishnu or Krishna. Like there's so many followers of the Vedas. You know, there's also like there's I just say how there's different like incarnations of Vishnu. There's also different incarnations of goddess Durga, and like there's some of them are called like Shanti. I think Krishna Kesha Prabhu may know, but like something Shanti something Durga. Where she's people in the mode of goodness also worship her. So it's not just Vishnu. As long as they're following like that, it's also in the mode of goodness. Yeah.
Hmm.
Krishna says that. Yeah, worshipping them. Yeah, there's worship sattvic demigods. Yeah. Yeah. And then the mode of passion is to worship people on this planet, and mode of ignorance is to worship ghosts. Ghosts. Yeah. Yeah. Because and many once Prabhupada was asked this question, that Hare Krishna. What do you say? Yeah, no, your voice is powerful. So Prabhupada was asked this question, is it better to worship like one God in the name of Christianity, or like is it better to be like followers of the Vedas, just worshiping Durga, this, that, or the other thing? Prabhupada says it's better to be a follower of the Vedas because somehow the other you'll come across Krishna. And so all that, even the mode of goodness stuff will help you rise to worshipping Krishna.
If you worship, if you worship Sai Baba, so-called, if you are a Vedic, a follower of so-called Vedic, this one, and if you worship Sai Baba, is it better, or if you worship Jesus Christ is better?
Jesus.
No,
you're favorable to Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, but unfortunately you're worshipping Sai Baba. But you're not favorable for Bhagavad Gita or anything, but you worship Jesus Christ, which is good. Yeah, the point is, Maharaj in one lecture he says that it is better to worship Sai Baba because you're at least no, you're favorable to some glimpse of at least. You know, there are people, and I'll tell you a little shocking thing. There are people who said in their dream, Sai Baba, Sai Baba came and told them to join Krishna consciousness. Then I told him, it is so bogus that Prabhupada had to come in the form of Sai Baba to tell you that you have to come to Krishna consciousness. And there are people who say that Sai Baba told me to come to your place. There are so many Telugu people all over the world, specifically in Africa and all. Africa also. So many Telugu people. So my point is that Nityanima Prabhu was there in Africa. They used to preach in Malawi. There is a small country called Malawi. There, this guy comes and he said that Sai Baba came in a dream and said me that you have to attend Mangalarti today. And from that day he is coming for Mangalarti. So many people like that in India. Actually, in India, girls are more, young girls, they are very much attracted to this Sai Baba worship. So much.
You were mentioning about how a lot of people will accept or reject like different religious ideas based off of their worldviews. And just based off of your story too, I was wondering if like in order to change our worldview, like suffering has to happen, or if suffering is like the cause of that sincerity. And I guess I'm more so just wondering because in the Bhagavad Gita, like it has the 4 people who come to like know Krishna, which are the distressed and those who are inquisitive and seeking wealth. But the distressed is one category, but I don't know, are those other people sincere in their approach as well, or is that suffering necessary?
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to happen, but it definitely helps. Like in my experience, it helped. And like you said, Arjuna's kind of suffering in that situation, so he submits to Krishna, surrenders. But as far as, I don't think it has to happen. Just like you could, get Prabhupada's books and then realize that what it's saying is accurate, and then give up what you're doing and come surrender. I think some of the people here did that, so I don't know.
Your question exactly was, do you have to suffer to come to Krishna consciousness, or is there other ways? Is that they just different? Sincerity doesn't you don't have to necessarily suffer. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Chaturveda bhajante mam jana sukrita norjuna artho jigyasarartati jnani cha bharatarshaba. That there's 4 kinds of people who approach Krishna. The distressed, the inquisitive, those who are in seek of wealth, and those who are just curious about the absolute truth. So 4 of these categories are all sincere because they're approaching Krishna in some way, because they know where to go to take shelter. But the best of them all, Krishna says, Tesham gnani nitya yukta eka bhaktir vishishyate priyo hi gnani notyadam aham sacha mama priya. And then udara sarva evaite jnanitvatmaiva me matam. Really? Udara sarva evaite jnanitvatmaiva me matam asita sahi yuktatma mam evanutamam gatim. You got it wrong. Yeah. So, Krishna says that the Jnani is very, very dear to him, so much so that Jnani doesn't mean like the Jnanis on who say like Aham Brahmasmi, but Those who are fully in cognizance of Sambandha Gyan, which means one's relationship with Krishna, Abhideya Gyan, which means how to perform loving devotional service to Krishna, and Prayojana Gyan, which means love for Krishna. That person is the most dear. You can please read these verses. Huh? Yeah, Gyani Tatmai Me Matam, they're so dear to me that they're like myself. I consider them like to be a part of my family, like they're so close to me, you know. So like I don't consider them, you know, I cannot live without them. Therefore, like I consider them, me and them to be so tightly together, you know. So please, you can read these 3 verses in the Bhagavad Gita, and then you can understand more. Chapter 7, text number, I think 16, 17, and 18. I'll tell you the verse. Right? Manjay, do you know the verse numbers? Yes, 16, yes, Mataji. It's 16, yeah, you can read from chapter 7, text number 16 to 19. Ends with that. It's okay, we don't have,
I'm talking about Mike. Come on. Suffering as a inspiration to, to take up Krishna consciousness. But if you see, bhakti entirely is independent and supreme. It doesn't depend on anything. If you say that people become or take up some godly service because they got suffering, regarding this, Srila Prabhupada gave one anecdote during the World War, where the French people went to the church and they prayed, and the Germans also went to the church and they also prayed. But French people or somebody turned into atheists because they were killed, or the Germans, they became more godly because they won the war. Although suffering is both of them, but one side won, other side suffering. But because the suffering, actually there's so many people, even coming to Krishna consciousness, seeing that the suffering is more, they become turned into normal, they are averse of Krishna consciousness even, after coming to Krishna consciousness. If they come to Krishna consciousness and they think that, oh, Krishna, they have done so much of service. I know one devotee in India, back in India, that at least one of our god brother, he thought that it's too much, it's enough, and then they put a close of all these things and they wrapped it and threw it all Krishna consciousness, the beads, everything. They don't want, because they can't tolerate this. They think that if you practice Krishna consciousness, Krishna has to remove all our suffering. Oh, Krishna is there meant for removing our this one. Why we have to suffer? We have done so much. We are doing Ekadashi Vrata. We are not doing Nirjala. We are doing Phala, Nirjala, Eka, all these things. So it is like their inspiration is not that Krishna Arthya Kila Cheshta. That means we want to do everything for Krishna. They want to do, our suffering is there, so Krishna has to mitigate us. So that inspiration is very dangerous in one way. We may come. Sometimes it is that we are so much of struggling in the outside world. People come and Krishna gives that inspiration. If you give Artha example, Artharthi, Gajendra was suffering like anything. And he just offered a flower, and Vishnu just runs from Shwetadeep, and Lakshmi is thinking, why is he running? All the Shankha Chakra Gada Padma are running behind him, and where is he running about? And only Vishnu can hear what Gajendra is thinking about. So sometimes Krishna gives this inspiration to be in Krishna, but that is not the hangover every time. So we have to come out of that. As in Brahmacharya book, Krishna will give some happiness in the initial stage, but we have to do also something to get to come out of that. Okay, every time we get happiness, but sometimes we have to struggle a lot also. Like I'm struggling over here. So with so many things, I am the myself is an example, of course. So yeah, because we may I always remember this example. We are in the I was coming in the flight, it was in 27,000 miles away, and it is flying in 525 kilometers per hour, it is written there. But it doesn't seem to be like going so fast or it's so high. It's going so smoothly. And sometimes we get the, some
Turbulence.
announcement that kindly keep your, what is that? Oxygen mask. And it sometimes happens like this. And we get bewildered what happened. So point is that sometimes it happens, but we think, okay, we should go on in our life. Suffering is not the inspiration. Krishna is the inspiration.
Whose phone is it? That is, so you could, in this regard, devotees don't mind. We have a day off, so we could spend more time hearing and chanting about Krishna. So I just sent this to Chandan. Oh man, okay. Can you pull up chapter 8, Canto 8, text, Canto 8, chapter 17? I'll tell you which verse. I'll tell you, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it myself. Okay, yeah. You can pull up this verse, 12. You can see over here in the purport, so this is, in regards to your talking about suffering, The Supreme Personality of Godhead being situated in everyone's heart, especially in the heart of his devotees, is always ready to help the devotees in adversity. Since he knows everything, he knows how things are to be adjusted, and he does the needful to relieve the suffering of his devotee. So Krishna knows, when we're suffering also, Krishna knows exactly what needs to be done in order for us to, get more attached to him. Therefore, when a devotee gives everything he has to Krishna, and he's suffering in order to perform that service to Krishna, when Krishna comes through, it's very nectarian. Whatever, we want to do so many Bhagavatams, so whatever it may be, when Krishna finally comes through, it's amazing, And, Krishna also says, Prabhupada was also going through this, that his entire business had burnt down. Oh yeah, okay, you're in Prabhupada Leela Amrita, okay. So his entire business was being burnt down, like his, people were like stealing from him and all these things. And he was wondering, he went up to Sridhar Maharaj, his really good friend, and he asked him, this is verse 1088.8. 1088.8. Yasyaham anugrahnami harishye tad dhanam shanaihi. That when I'm really, you can pull that up. Yeah, 1088.8. Swajana dukha dukhitam. Prabhu, what is this? 1088.8. So it's over here, you can see the translation. That the personality of God has said, if I especially favor someone, I gradually deprive him of his wealth. Then the relatives and friends of such a poverty-stricken man abandon him. In this way, he suffers one distress after another. Because Krishna makes him in such a way that ultimately he's going to be our only shelter. So.
Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti here counters a possible objection. What fault would there be in God's incarnating for some other reason than to deliver a saintly person from suffering? The learned Acharya responds, yes, my dear brother, this makes good sense, but you are not expert in understanding spiritual moods. Please listen. It is at night that the sunrise becomes attractive. During the hot summer, that cold water gives comfort, and during the cold winter months, that warm water is pleasing. Lamplight appears attractive in darkness, not in the glaring light of day. And when one is distressed by hunger, food tastes especially good. In other words, to strengthen his devotee's mood of dependence on him and longing for him, the Lord arranges for his devotees to go through some suffering, and when he appears in order to deliver them, their gratitude and transit into pleasure are boundless.
Srila Prabhupada's, whatever the suffering or whatever we see apparently suffering, actually that is not suffering. Prabhupada was standing 5 hours in the hot sun, and some bull comes and hits him in the back, and he falls down. These all things are all Mahatmanas tumambata devim prakriti masrita. It is, and it may seem, there is a lecture by Maharaj, what is Bhima's mood? In Mayapur, Maharaj gave, how to understand acharyas and their life, Bhaktivinoda Thakur entering into so many things. And actually, these are all, we should not see those all things, that doesn't matter. It may seem like suffering, but actually that is all, it's under the Krishna's this one. But if you see, even actually more striking is this Kunti Maharani's prayer that Vipada Santuta Sarve Tatra Tatra Jagat Guru. Those devotees who think that particular verse is actually, she asks for suffering. She doesn't say that you don't give me suffering, she asks for so that we can remember you. But actually sometimes suffering is also required so that we can, it's the purification in Krishna consciousness. For outsiders, it is like very difficult. They may become atheists, but for devotees, it is purification.
All right. Thank you. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anshakapa tubhyascha kripasanubhyavcha titanam bhavanebhyo